Hello, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. So good to have you with us here on this Sunday morning. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. It's a beautiful sunrise here on Florida's Space Coast. SpaceX targeting a liftoff of its Falcon 9 rocket. This is set to be the final Falcon 9 flight for the month of August, the 14th in this month. On board this particular launch vehicle are 28 of SpaceX's V2 Mini optimized Starlink satellites, heading into low Earth orbit, of course, like its fellow Starlinks that are currently orbiting around the Earth. Departure time set for 7:49 a.m. Eastern, 11:49 UTC for those joining around the world. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of the broadcast today. Our photographer, Michael Kane, is running the tracking cams this morning. John and Adam are off today. But if you're not already following our photography team on X, you can find them at their handles here. Michael is at MD Kane Jr. John is at John Pisani Photo. Adam at Aburn NYC. Also be sure to follow Spaceflight Now, simply at Spaceflight Now. We're also on Blue Sky, Threads, and Facebook. We'll also be joined with tracking assistance this morning by our friends Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions, as well as Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. As we're getting things going this morning, I want to thank our moderator du jour. Looks like we've got Mark Otto on tap with us today, alongside Aussie Space Girl, joining us from down in Australia. Good to have both of you with us today. Appreciate you as always. And you can help make sure that the mods have an easier lift this morning by following the rules of our live chat. We ask that you converse in English so that the mods can respond as appropriate, that you refrain from delving into overt politics and religion, and that you do not type in all caps. Emojis are fine, of course, but we ask that you not create a huge block of them just so it obscures too much of the chat and everyone else can say their piece. Last but not least, if you would treat each other with the kindness and respect that you would like to be treated yourself, then we'll all get along swimmingly. This and every launch attempt are made possible in no small part by the ongoing support of our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like Sulfur for Lunch, Larry Grove, Clark, Mark Pachotnik, Mel Roberts Harold. Oh, good to see you, Mel. Feel like it's been a minute. Jean Marquis, and many, many others. Freddie Sodium, hello to you. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to members-only videos here on YouTube. Access to our members-only Discord server. And, of course, the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Want to welcome a new channel member, Schaefer O'Neill, joining us with channel membership at the mission specialist level. Thanks for supporting us, Schaefer. Glad to have you with us. Last little bit of housekeeping. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings-on in the realm of space or spaceflight, or would just like to offer a little bit of support this morning, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature And not only will he be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, which will also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now. And that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. To that end, I want to thank Mel Roberts Harold for a $5 super chat. Mel says, so glad to be here in Cocoa this morning. Perfect way to spend what is likely my last visit to the Space Coast. Well, if it is your last, sorry to see you go, Mel, but glad you get to have a nice orbital launch send-off before you depart from the Space Coast. As you see, of course, SpaceX is counting down to departure from Space Launch Complex 40 at 7:49 a.m. Eastern, 11:49 UTC. The window today does extend out until 11:15 a.m. Eastern. So if, for whatever reason, SpaceX is unable to launch at its current targeted T0 time, it does have some ability to move laterally within the window, as long as it has not begun fueling, of course. SpaceX uses what's known as a load and go style of fueling, which means it tanks its Falcon 9 rocket almost right up until the point at which it's needing to leave the pad. That's because they use a super cold densified liquid oxygen, and idling risks heating up that LOX and therefore does not present SpaceX with the option to hold the countdown once tanking has begun. As you can see in the turn-based camera view, there are some clouds, broadly speaking, in the area around the Space Coast. The 45th Weather Squadron forecast a 90% chance for favorable weather at liftoff today. It deteriorates down to about 65% favorable as the window goes on. So the earlier that they can launch, the better. And that's just because as we get into the daytime heating, the risk of offshore storms increases and builds the probability that there could be a violation due to the cumulus cloud rule or the anvil cloud rule. You're taking a live look now at a satellite loop from the GOES East satellite, looking at the cloud cover. You can see much of it is pushing off and away to the southeast from the Florida Peninsula. A little bit of clouds bubbling up to the north, but doesn't look like anything too terribly impressive. With the giant caveat that I am not a certified meteorologist, but to the untrained eye, it looks fairly benign. If for whatever reason SpaceX is unable to launch today, they do have another backup opportunity tomorrow. Weather does dip down a little bit as far as the odds for good launch weather in a 24-hour backup scenario. Looking at an 80% chance of good conditions at the start of tomorrow's window. That drops to 60% favorable by the end of tomorrow's window. Again, that's just if it's needed by SpaceX. Time now T minus 48 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. At this point in the count, SpaceX is just about 10 minutes away from the start of the prop load sequence, which will begin with the launch director making the call on whether or not they are ready to proceed with tanking the Falcon 9 rocket. So let's go ahead and step through the countdown timeline. Let you know what's still ahead for SpaceX in preparation for launching this 14th and final Falcon 9 launch of the month. As I just mentioned, T-minus 38 minutes is when they make the call for the start of prop load. SpaceX does its readiness pull electronically, so if it feels like it's in a good position to do so, this can happen a little bit earlier. But once the go-ahead is given, tanking of the rocket begins at T-minus 35 minutes with the loading of RP-1, which is a rocket-grade kerosene. That happens on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. Meanwhile, liquid oxygen begins flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage at this point. Half an hour before liftoff, the helium load on the pressure vessels on the first stage begins. Same is true on the second stage a few minutes afterwards. Cryogenic helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. 23 minutes before liftoff, the second stage RP-1 tank should be full. At T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds, we'll see the strong back chill-down process get underway. That's when SpaceX is thermally conditioning the feed lines there at the pad ahead of second stage liquid oxygen load. We see this manifest as the so-called big vent from the strong back. That at pad 40 begins at roughly T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. Lasting just shy of 4 minutes, second stage LOX load begins at the T-minus 16 minute mark. 7 minutes before flight, the engine chill down sequence begins. This is when SpaceX flows a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect those 9 Merlin 1D engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank is full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract sequence get underway. After pressurizing the support tanks for this operation, we'll see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, reclines a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff. And at that point, it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before departure, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage, about a minute afterwards. At that point, the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and at the same time, the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch call 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T-minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlins are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Once again, currently targeting 7:49 a.m. Eastern, 11:49 UTC. About T-minus 44 minutes and 44 seconds. T-minus 44 minutes and counting. As it so happens, the first stage booster that is flying today's mission, dubbed Starlink 10-14, is in fact a member of one of SpaceX's Falcon 9 frequent flyers, as we call them. Here's the current top tier list of the most flown boosters. Of course, we just recently saw B-1067, which is adorned with a literal crown moniker above its number on the rocket. Still the commanding flight leader for SpaceX, having just returned from its 30th flight. The booster on tap today, though, a little bit further down the list, it is B-1077, going to break that tie with B-1078 and make its 23rd trip to space and back today. It's set to land on the SpaceX drone ship called Just Read the Instructions, nearly 8.5 minutes after liftoff. SpaceX is working to certify its first stage boosters along with its payload fairings for up to 40 flights apiece. Here's a look at where SpaceX stands as far as the number of launches it's accomplished so far this year. 107 to date, looking at 108 in just about 42.5 minutes from now. I mentioned this will be SpaceX's 14th Falcon 9 rocket launch of the year. As you see a manatee or two bobbing above the water. The Indian River Lagoon water system is a great spot to catch manatees. You can see, looks like at least two that are out there hanging out in front of the rocket. Now 41 minutes ahead of liftoff. Got some really nice color from the sun as it's rising over the space coast, piercing through the clouds and just hitting the rocket and the launch infrastructure just right to get a sort of nice sunrise glow. In the next couple minutes, the SpaceX launch directors should be making their call on the start of Propellant for today's mission. Of the so far 13 Falcon 9 rockets that have launched in the month of August, this being number 14, when all is said and done, 9 out of those missions will have been in support of SpaceX's Starlink constellation. In fact, in the month of August, when you stack them all up together, SpaceX will have launched a total of 236 of their Starlink V2 mini satellites into low Earth orbit. Also worth noting that with this mission, SpaceX will have crossed 1,900 total Starlink satellites that have been sent into low Earth orbit in 2025. This week has been another big notch in the SpaceX Starlink belt, given that they have just crossed their next million customers, now touting 7 million customers across 150 countries, territories, and smaller markets. That benchmark was achieved, or announced at least, on Thursday. That 7 million customer threshold comes just a few months after SpaceX reached 6 million customers across 140 countries, territories, or smaller markets back in June. And given that they were at 4 million customers back in September of 2024, it's a growth of 3 million customers in now less than a year for the Starlink constellation. Of course, the ultimate goal for SpaceX is to transition from launching its Starlink satellites on Falcon 9 rockets to instead setting them up on their dramatically larger Starship rocket. We saw the first ever deployment of Starlink simulator satellites during the Starship Flight 10 mission. This is an animation, of course, of what an orbital deployment of actual Starlink version 3 satellites would look like. During the broadcast, SpaceX commentators noted that the deployment sequence for the V3s would take about a minute per piece, so not quite as rapid pace as what you're seeing here in this video. We also learned during the broadcast that Starship is capable of carrying a stack of 60 of these V3 satellites. So a full deployment sequence would take roughly an hour at a minute interval. While we won't see deployment captured live by this mission in the broadcast, this is an idea of what deployment will look like about an hour and 3 minutes after liftoff. This is the deployment of another batch of Starlink V2 mini satellites from a different Falcon 9 rocket earlier this year. Again, after liftoff, these are set to deploy at about T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 40 seconds. They all get released as one stack, as you can see here, and then slowly drift apart to their operating orbital positions. 35.5 minutes remaining before the planned liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. And we're getting right up to the point at which SpaceX is going to start tanking its Falcon 9 launch vehicle. Assuming that go-ahead was, in fact, given roughly 3 minutes ago. We're now less than 10 seconds away from the fueling sequence beginning. Given the lighting conditions today, it may be a little tricky to see the start of fueling. But of course, because SpaceX doesn't announce the start of fueling for its Falcon 9 rockets for a typical Starlink mission, we'll be watching for those visual cues. just about 33 and a half minutes remaining on the clock. Where we're going to be looking along the Falcon booster is just about where you see those two branches that cross kitty corner across the rocket there. The higher of those two, right about or just a hair above where it starts to cross in front of the rocket from our camera's perspective. That's about the point where we'll start to see a bit of a frost line form and some vapor in that area as well. SpaceX begins to load the super cold densified liquid oxygen on board the rocket's booster. Again, because of the time of day and getting just a little bit of heat distortion out that way, it's going to be kind of tricky to see definitively. So it might take another minute or two before we can really make a good call on the start of prop load. And yes, we are in fact seeing signs of fueling, which means SpaceX has keyed into that T0 liftoff time of 7:49 a.m. Eastern, 11:49 UTC. Time now, T-minus 27 minutes, 54 seconds and counting. At this point in the count, SpaceX is loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage, and will do so on the second in just about a minute and a half. Taking a look at our live chat, certainly appreciate the roughly 1,200 of you who are watching along with us live this morning. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage today. Just about 26 and a half minutes remaining on the clock. See a comment from Dan Santarciero about the Merritt Island Wildlife Refuge and Playa Linda Beach. Wanted to make sure those stay open. Not explicitly stated, but I'm guessing that's in regard to the potential impact from future static fire tests and launches of SpaceX's Starship rocket from Launch Complex 39A. This past week, there were a pair of in-person meetings here on the Space Coaster. A pair of days of in-person meetings. There were 2 meetings on Tuesday and then another 2 on Thursday for folks to learn more about the likely impact from the Starship rocket as assessed by the Federal Aviation Administration. For those of you who were unable to attend in person and want to hear the full presentation, there is a virtual meeting which is scheduled for, I believe, the 3rd, September 3rd. So this coming Wednesday. And that's a virtual meeting on Zoom from 6 to 8 p.m. I believe we've got the information for that on our website in one of our articles on Starship. It's over at spaceflightnow.com, of course, or you can go to your favorite search engine and just type in SpaceX FAA Launch Complex 39A, and that should lead you to all the materials related to that proposed development for Starship. Public comment is going to be open through September 22nd, if memory serves. Just under 24 and a half minutes remaining on the clock right now. Want to welcome in a new channel member. Welcome to Frederick Gleim, joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Frederick. Glad to have you with us. "24 minutes remaining. Let's go ahead and talk about the Falcon 9 first stage booster that's flying today's Starlink mission. It is B-1077 in the SpaceX fleet, getting ready to make its 23rd trip to space and back. Before that happens, though, let's take a trip down memory lane and talk about this particular booster's flight history. It kicked off with the launch of an international crew that headed up to the ISS on board the Dragon named Endurance, making its second flight. This mission was notable for the commercial crew program since it was the first time that a Russian cosmonaut flew on board a SpaceX Dragon vehicle to the space station. That was Annika Kina. Next up for this booster was the GPS-3 Space Vehicle number 6 spacecraft, up to a medium Earth orbit, launching on January 18th. That was followed up by the Inmarsat 6 F2 satellite on February 18th. The first Starlink satellite mission for this booster lifted off on March 29th of 2023, this 5-10 mission. Another Dragon flight for this booster of the cargo persuasion this time, CRS-28, the 28th Commercial Resupply Services mission for SpaceX. That was followed up by the launch of the Galaxy 37 mission for Intelsat on August 3rd. Have a trio of Starlinks after that. You had Starlink 6-13 on September 1st, 6-25 on October 30th, and 6-33 on December 7th. That was followed up by the first launch for SpaceX carrying a Cygnus spacecraft on behalf of Northrop Grumman up to the International Space Station. That was the NG-20 mission, which also launched from this pad that you're seeing there live on your screen on the right-hand side. SpaceX is getting ready to launch another Cygnus vehicle. That is the NG-23 mission, looking to lift off on September 15th at the earliest. After NG-20, it's back to Starlinks we go for a little bit. Starlink 6-43 on March 10th, 6-51 on April 17th, 6-63 on May 24th, 10-4 on July 28th, 8-11 on September 5th. And then it was the turn for what was billed as the TD-7 mission, otherwise referred to as Optus X, on November 17th, 2024. Coming into this year, it has been all Starlinks all the time, coming up to the present. Here's that list for you. Running from January 6th to the most recent launch on July 8th. And we are now less than 20 seconds away from the start of the so-called big vent. SpaceX prepares to thermally condition the feed lines there at the pad before loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's second stage. And there you see the vent is now beginning. If you look at Chuck's camera view here, wind coming from offshore blowing right at us, so the vent is blowing into the crew access tower today. This venting will last just under 4 minutes here at pad 40. Again, setting up conditions for second stage liquid oxygen load. 16 minutes remaining on the clock now ahead of the launch of Starlink 10-14. At this point, SpaceX is loading liquid oxygen on board the Falcon 9's second stage. Everything progressing smoothly for a liftoff at, again, 7:49 a.m. Eastern, 11:49 UTC. Time now, T minus 13 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. Talking about the payload that is on board today's mission. A batch of 28 Starlink V2 mini satellites. Today's Falcon 9 flight represents the 77th Starlink launch of the year so far. Each of these satellites clocks in at about 1,267 pounds, or about 575 kilograms, considerably lighter than the previously flown Starlink V2 minis. With their solar panels unfurled, these optimized satellites have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They still use argon Hall effect thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. They were built up in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle, and they'll be deployed at about 172 miles or 277 kilometers in altitude at a 53-degree inclination. Time now, T minus 11 minutes, 33 seconds and counting. As SpaceX prepares to launch what will be the company's 108th Falcon 9 rocket launch of the year so far, let's go ahead and talk about SpaceX's workhorse vehicle, the Falcon 9, which stands 70 meters or 229 feet in height. What? We'll come back to parts of the rocket real quick, but something we don't often get to see actually is captured by our friend Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions, a weather balloon that has just recently taken flight. Meteorologists will launch these periodically just to make sure that they have a good reading ahead of the launch of an orbital rocket from the Space Coast. As we mentioned early in the broadcast, the 45th Weather Squadron had forecast a 90% chance for favorable weather at the beginning of today's window. And at the back end, drops down to about 65% chance for favorable conditions. So one last weather balloon sent up just to make sure that they had a good read on the very latest conditions before we see the launch of this Falcon 9 rocket, now less than 10 minutes away from its departure. Coming back to the Falcon 9, which, picking up where I left off, has a diameter of about 3.66 meters or 12 feet, standing 229 feet in height or roughly 70 meters. The vast majority of that, of course, is made up by the rocket's booster stage. Today's first stage is B-1077, which is looking to make its 23rd flight to space and back. At the base of the first stage are the 9 Merlin engines, which give the rocket its name. They burn a combination of rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen to produce 1.7 million pounds of thrust at liftoff. Around the engine compartment are the black carbon fiber landing legs that are used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Today, SpaceX is using just read the instructions. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. And that image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the vehicle's second stage. In that first stage, main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely inside the inner stage adapter until the point of stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket is powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVac engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust, and it'll be fired twice on today's flight to place the 28 Starlink V2 mini satellites to their intended orbit. Like with the first stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket also burns the same propellant mix, that being RP1 and LOX. Following the jettison of the Starlink satellites, there will be one final burn, a deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back into the atmosphere where it is designed to burn up and help eliminate the risk of creating unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, as we approach the 7-minute mark in the countdown, at the top of the Falcon 9 stack, of course, are the payload fairings that are currently encapsulating the 28 Starlink satellites. The fairings are made up of a carbon composite material and stand at 13.1 meters or 43 feet in height and are 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. The 2 fairing halves will be recovered a little bit further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship. Following their re-entry through the atmosphere, they make their final splashdown in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. Once brought aboard one of SpaceX's recovery vessels, they will be brought back through Port Canaveral, then off to SpaceX's Hangar X site here at the Kennedy Space Center, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future missions. Just under 6.5 minutes to go before this rocket takes flight. Couple milestones to note here. We're about a minute past the point at which SpaceX started the engine chill sequence, and coming up in a few seconds is when the first stage kerosene tank should reach flight levels.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressing for the start of strongback retract.
And as you just heard by that call out, we're now getting SpaceX mission audio as well as pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket there at Space Launch Complex 40.
Strongback retract has started.
And good views of the rocket there. Momentarily, you'll see the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings open up, and then the large structure just behind the rocket from this vantage point, transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strongback, will start to recline a few degrees away from the rocket. You can see those clamp arms now opening up. Coming up in roughly 30 seconds, we should hear a call that the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Good call on stage 1 liquid oxygen load wrapping up. We should hear a similar call regarding the second stage at about the 2-minute mark. T-minus 2 minutes and counting.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And with that good call, the Falcon 9 rocket is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. The additional venting you're seeing are the ground gas closeouts.
Ground gas closeouts.
This is SpaceX releasing the remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines there at the pad. Coming up on 1 minute before liftoff. One minute and counting.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
And with that good call, we're just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to give their go for launch, coming in the next few seconds.
Launch director, go for launch.
And with that good call, we're now just about 30 seconds away from the 14th and final Falcon 9 rocket to launch in August of 2025. "15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 10-14 mission The Falcon 9 has cleared the towers.
Stage 1 propulsion is nominal.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Now approaching about 1 minute into flight.
Vehicle is supersonic.
Rocket approaching max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle.
Max Q.
Throttling back up on the Merlin engines. You hear a call out momentarily for MVAC chill. Thermal conditioning of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage. Coming up on a few events now in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO, at about T plus 2 minutes and 25 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation and then the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine on the rocket's second stage, for about 10 seconds to MECO. Also, the payload fairings will jettison just before the 3-minute mark.
Stage 2 engine chill.
There you see MECO. Stage separation.
MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
Second stage engine start.
Stage 2 engine start.
Good calls, good visuals from the SpaceX onboard cameras. You see those hypersonic grid fins deploying. Fairing jettison. It's coming up right about now. And there you see the fairings go in the big box.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And in the onboard cameras. Those fairing halves will fall back down to the waters of the Atlantic Ocean and be scooped up by one of SpaceX's recovery vessels for use on a future flight. Those pulses that you're seeing from the Falcon first stage booster, those are the cold gas thrusters, which help the Falcon 9 first stage make adjustments to its attitude or positioning as it starts to orient itself ahead of the entry burn. That will call upon 3 out of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 first stage to dramatically slow that part of the vehicle down in anticipation of the start of the landing burn. Looks like Pete's still got a good bead on the booster here. We'll continue to follow it as long as we're able. And hopefully there won't be any clouds that get in Pete's view that will obscure us seeing the entry burn here. Time of day makes it very tricky to continue tracking the booster at this stage in flight, but again, we'll continue to bring you these pictures as long as we're able. A little more than 4.5 minutes into the mission so far. The entry burn is set to begin at about T plus 6 minutes and 10 seconds. little more than 5.5 minutes into the mission, and less than 30 seconds remaining to the start of the entry burn.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn.
This burn will last less than 30 seconds in total.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
And with the conclusion of the entry burn, we're now looking ahead to the start of the landing burn, set to begin at about T plus 7 minutes and 58 seconds. Setting up for a drone ship touchdown just before the 8.5 minute mark.
Stage 1 transonic. Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Stage 2 FTS is saved. Nominal orbit insertion.
Good call there for nominal parking orbit. At this stage in the flight, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 rocket will continue to cruise until T plus 54 minutes and 18 seconds. That'll be followed by a 2-second burn at that point, and then the Starlink satellites will be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 40 seconds post liftoff. A good liftoff and a good landing for Falcon booster B-1077, completing its 23rd trip to space and back. We'll turn to our mission stats momentarily. First, want to welcome in new channel member Donald Evans, DJE, joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Donald. We're glad to have you with us. Turning now to our mission stats, they currently stand. As mentioned, flight number 23 for B-1077, now in the books. This was SpaceX's 525th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 108th of the year so far. This was SpaceX's 461st Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was the company's 157th orbital launch within the last 365 days. This was SpaceX's 275th orbital launch from Pad 40 and the 330th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. With this final flight for Falcon rocket in August, here's where our pie chart now currently stands. Moving on to some mission stats for the recovery side of things. This was the 134th good landing on the drone ship called Just Read the Instructions. That marked SpaceX's 403rd drone ship landing and their 497th overall booster landing as well. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 74th orbital launch from the Sunshine State of Florida, the 114th launch from U.S. soil, the 126th launch from U.S. Rocket Company, and the 196th orbital launch around the world. There have been 5 mishaps so far this year, and here's where our pie chart now currently stands. Looking down the road as far as our launches coming up next, we've got the Starlink 17-8 flight looking to lift off the evening of September 2nd, so just after the Labor Day holiday wraps up on Monday. That'll be followed by our next launch from here at the Space Coast, another Falcon 9 flight from this pad that you just are seeing now live on your screen. Starlink 10-22 set to lift off the morning of September 3rd. That will be followed up by another Florida Falcon flight, Starlink 10-57, also in the morning hour of September 4th. All things being equal and a series of successes for SpaceX, the September 4th launch is set to be the 500th Falcon booster first stage landing to date. Just getting our launch replays ready. As we await those, want to thank Mel Roberts Harold for one more $5 super chat. Mel says, "So long, folks. Catch y'all from Chicagoland next time. Safe travels up to the Windy City. Enjoy some Chicago-style pizza for all of us here at Spaceflight Now." As a proud Northwestern alum, it's unfortunately few and far between when I get up to Chicago these days, but certainly hold a soft spot in my heart for Chicago. All right, it looks like we've got those replays ready for you now. We're getting things kicked off with the press site fixed view from Michael Kane. And that'll go ahead and do it for our live coverage of the Starlink 10-14 mission. Coincidentally, the 14th and final Falcon 9 rocket for the month of August. Want to thank our moderators in the live chat have been helping us out throughout the course of the broadcast. Thanks to Mark Otto and to Aussie Space Girl. Also want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast today, alongside Michael Kane, who's been working all the cameras out in the field. Thanks as well to our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, and to Pete Carstens with MaxQ Productions. As always, you can head over to our website day and night, whenever it's convenient for you, to catch up with the latest space news as well as our launch schedule, kept as up to date as we possibly can, so you can keep apprised of the latest mission from the Space Coast and beyond. Hope you all have a wonderful, and for those of you who do have a 3-day weekend, a wonderful and safe 3-day weekend. Enjoy the Labor Day holiday, and we will see you on the other side. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.